Today we're going to talk about shooting recurves and why you might want to stay with it or might you want to switch to a compound bow. Hi, my name is Roy Canterbury. I'm going to be host today on Archery Talk 101. And with us today we have John. Welcome to the show, John.
Thank you. Good to be here.
So tell us a little about something about yourself.
I'm basically a pretty simple guy. Just started hunting probably about 15 years ago, and it was all archery to start with. I started out with a compound and switched to recurve later. Now I'm kind of with nerve issues and as far as health wise, and as far as my structural, without having any type of pain. So I just kind of shoot a compound between the compound and a crossbow now. And two, I picked up a muzzle loader from last year, killed a couple of deer with that. Just gives me something to give my nerves in my back a rest from pulling. And I don't do a whole lot of practice during hunting season. So as far as shooting wise, I just test my equipment, make sure it's up where it needs to be and it's hitting where I'm actually putting my pin or aiming. If I was shooting a recurve, I definitely look it over, test my arrows, make sure my broadheads were flying straight, sharp, stuff like that.
So why did you get started in archery?
I got started in archery. It's something I always kind of wanted to do. I just kind of started late. Kind of grew up in a basically poor family. I was always involved in outdoors as far as fishing, stuff like that. I did a lot of fishing when I was coming up. So one of the boys here, the youngest boy, which he's 22 now. Yeah, 22 years old. And he got started in a middle school with hunter safety and competitions they had archery, skeet shooting, all on the same day. And I went with him there and helped him get ready, got him his first bow and all that. And he had a bow here. It was an old Darton, had the little smaller cams. That thing was a beast of a bow. Being at 60 pounds, it maxed out at 63. And I started shooting fingers with him out here in the yard. And after a little while, I got a release on it. And my first deer, me and him was hunting, that came by. I couldn't even get the 60-pound bow back. I couldn't even figure it out. I got so excited. That thing felt like it was like 200 pounds. Couldn't even hardly pull it. And I ended up missing the deer. Finally got the bow back and ended up missing the deer. That's how I got started with one of the boys here.
Yeah, that's always interesting how everybody gets started. Everybody has a different story. And that's why I like to ask it, because everybody's got a different story. And it's like, they're all interesting, how you got started in archery. And, so you've been shooting, recurve for a while. How was that going? What was your typical practice?
My typical practice after a little bit, it was kind of just random. Some of the practice techniques I was doing, I know if I shoot too much, I pick up bad habits fairly quick. And you talking about that's hard to shake, and it takes me months to clear that out. But right here toward the end of it, I guess last year I worked on just nothing but blank bell, just went back down to fundamentals and basics of form, because not everybody's got the same build or same flexibility. You have to work around certain things, which my eyesight's not the greatest, so I have to work around that. And I started doing blank bell and started improving my form, and then I started shooting better, and didn't have to shoot every day. I'd probably shoot an arrow or two every day, but as far as my main practice, I would start at 3 yards, shoot 2 or 3 arrows in a spot. If I hit them all in there, and I'll take a step back and work my way back and keep the distances in my mind that I hunted in pretty fresh in my mind. So usually about 25 and in is about what I do as far as hunting distance, and 25 is worst case scenario.
Yeah, with a recurve, you don't have quite the range that you will with a compound or a crossbow.
No, it depends on where you're at. I know South Cox, I mean, him hunting out there in the Midwest. Most guys that hunt in the Midwest with traditional equipment, they may close the shot maybe 50 yards, and they practice that. I mean, met Randy Coolin. He said he's got to have a minimum of 50 yards, which he hunts more open areas than I would here in North Carolina. My average hunting distance with a recurve a couple years ago was about 8 yards. I can literally see the deer's eyelashes when they come in. That were that close.
Yeah, that's always because nice when you get them in close. I've shot them and watched the hair change colors as the arrow, cut through the hide and go in, and that's cool where you're that close to get them in there. And that's what's nice about archery, is because you have to get them in close. And especially like my eyesight's not quite as good as it was before, and I don't see the pins as well as I did before, and so I'm kind of my max distance is going to be less than when I was 20 years younger, when I could see those distances.
Me with me shooting traditional, it's made me a lot better hunter on shot selection, on the shots I want to take. And I mean, last year I hunted with a compound, and just because of the nerve issues, and shot 2 deer quartering away with 2 different compounds I had set up, and shot them both quartering away. One ran about 30 yards, another one dropped right there in front of me. So shot selection that's one thing traditional has helped me with, is having better shot selection and putting the animal down faster, so you don't have to track as long. And some people get excited. I've been there, got excited and made bad shots, and you stomping around through the woods trying to find a deer that really is not dead, it's just wounded.
Yeah, and then they're just they heal up, and then they're just gone, and other times it's like you stomp and you stomp and you stomp, and it's like you finally find it. It's like, and it buried itself underneath the bushes.
Yes, definitely.
It crawled in there, and I've done that one time. We looked and looked and looked. I shot deer, it was fairly close. It run out 30 yards, stood broadside to me, so I leaned out, used my safety belt to keep me from falling off my tree stand, and shot another arrow, and it run to the top of the hill and made a right turn in the bushes, and that's where it laid. And we're walking up there, we can't find it. We look to the field on one side, look to the field on the other side. We come back, and finally, because we'd lost the blood trail, we couldn't find it anymore because we're last. It just turned, and we looked at it. Sure enough, there it was. It took a right turn right into the bushes, and that's where it went.
Yeah, they got a knack of laying down, going to heavy cover. That's the thing they feel the safest. They're gonna get out in the safest place they can, and usually that's about where they stop. As long as you ain't leaving the tree stand a little bit prematurely to go look, then you start pushing them, and they got to drive. And that's the thing about archery. You can only control the things you can, and other stuff you can't control. You just have to kind of leave it to itself.
Yeah, I had a couple of good hits on it, and we still waited like 3-4 hours before we started. Knowing that with archery, if you push, they're just gonna run off, and you'll never find them.
Oh yeah, especially if not quite so good a shot. I always try to go for double lungs. Usually for me, they fold up within 25 yards. They can't breathe. They ain't running far. They cover a lot of ground in those little few seconds, but if they can't breathe, they're going to just be done.
I like to catch the liver a little bit with it.
Yeah, and on the quartering away shots, like last year, I looked at the one I shot that dropped. It actually caught the diaphragm, liver, both lungs, and it went all the way to the front, come out at the bottom on the opposite shoulder. So it was a good shot. It dropped right there and clipped the spine on the way in with that type of shot. I went but 12 foot, 13 foot high.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, you ain't got to be all that high. I used to hunt at about 23, 25 feet. You got to be that high if you got good cover.
Yeah, and then if they come walking in real close, it's a real tough shot shooting almost straight down.
Yeah, I think the toughest shot I've had is I was 20 foot up, and the deer was 20 yards, or not 20 yards, but 10 yards. And that angle's near about 60, 70-degree angle, clipped both
Yeah.
lungs. And that is one of the toughest shots that I've made. And that was with a compound. I was sitting down. That was pretty tough.
Yeah, that makes kind of even a rough one because the angle you have to twist that
Yeah.
in order to get down that far. You know, I've
Yeah.
seen a lot of people do that, just drop their arm. It's like, well, no, that's not your forearm. Your forearm is here. You're bending
You
at
got
the
lean
waist, bending
forward.
at the waist, and
Yeah.
that's why it's nice to have the safety belt on because now you can lean and depend on the belt.
Yeah. That's what I
I've
had to
done
do.
that.
Is lean.
I've done that many times.
Yeah, the deer was actually sideways. I was sideways to the deer, so I was able to tilt my body down to keep my triangle like it's supposed to be, and that's how I made that shot. If I'd have been any other way, I wouldn't have made it. I'd have probably ended up shooting over the deer or under.
Yeah. Well, it's
It's a
tough to get those angles too, isn't it?
Yes, it is. So that's why I hunt a little bit lower to the ground and find more cover to have around me. The more cover you have and the lower you are, the less that angle is going to be, and probably a lot more successful most people will have in finding their deer.
Well, and you have too much of an angle, the exit hole is too low and it plugs up, and then you don't really get any blood like you
I
would
like to have
normally.
on my exit. I like to have a lower exit, just because of the blood. If it's higher up, it takes a little bit longer, and then you
Yeah.
start getting specks. I much rather come out low and come out with both lungs. They're going to breathe out. They're going to have blood coming out their nose, mouth, and plus the side. So it gives you a lot more of a trail to follow
Yeah.
if you
I,
had to go look for one.
I had one I was hunting in a snow cover, and I shot this doe, and I'm looking at the footprints as it's running, and the blood trail in the snow is about 3 or 4 feet to one side. It was like, here's the blood trail, but here's, over
Yeah,
here is where the blood trail is, but here's where the footprints in the snow are at, because there's no
yeah,
footprints over there. And so I was able to just follow it right up to it. It only went like 10 yards.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
bleeding out that quick. It's not going to last long.
No, it's shooting out pretty good if it's blowing out
Yeah.
that much. And yeah, that was really good shot. I mean, that's what I try to do is try to practice to where I'm putting the animal down quickly and quickly as possible. And that's the name of the game.
So how is different, because you've hunted with crossbow, compound and recurve. What's basically the difference between hunting with the different archery equipment?
Well, with that recurve or traditional equipment, you pay a lot more attention to detail, sharp broadheads. You want to, when I tune arrows, I just want an arrow that'll fly straight, not cocked, not, doing little kind of different stuff. I want it to fly true as possible. With that, you learn tuning more in arrow flight more so than you would somebody starting out in compound, because usually compounds and crossbows, there ain't no tuning. You're just trying to get
Right.
a broadhead just to fly as good as you can. And most of them are going with mechanicals, and which is fine. They do the job too, but you hear about a lot of failures. You have failures on fixed blades, depending on how thick the thickness of the blades that you're using. But with recurve, you're paying a lot more attention to detail, and you're trying to get better air flight and quicker recoveries. So, and you're going to shoot typically a heavier arrow. Typically, I've seen guys shoot 460 grains on a 60 something pound bow, trying to figure out how come their bow ain't blowing up, and that's each to his own, and it works for them. So my last deer I killed with a recurve, and I shot it with a 506 grain arrow, shot it lengthways, and it went slam through it. And that's with 46 pounds. It doesn't take a great deal of weight. And that's one thing you'll learn, is it doesn't take a great deal of weight. It's all about the weight of your arrow and how sharp your broadhead is and how tough if it can take the impact. And with a compound, there is some tuning. There's a lot more moving parts. So
Right.
It's definitely from learning traditional, then you start paying attention to a lot more detail. If if you bump the tree walking in and your sight ends up going off, you've shot at something, you totally missed it. Now you got to figure out which part that got moved, whether it's your sight or your rest. That's why I always check before I go. And the crossbows, just there ain't no jump. That deer ain't jumping no string. It ain't much animal's gonna be jumping it. I've got two of them here. One's running 400 foot a second straight out. So that deer, at least a little movement it makes, it's not even gonna have enough time at 20 yards or 30 yards to even move. It's just
Right.
gonna hit them so hard and knock them, pretty much kill them, a little bit. But if a man wants to really be a better hunter, archery is the way to do it. And actually hunting with traditional equipment will help you be a better hunter. Get more up close and personal, pay attention to details. And that's one thing, the difference between the three. It all takes some skill on the shooting end of it, but being able to really tune your own stuff and sharpen your own broadheads and getting a fixed blade to fly is a feat within itself.
Yeah, especially, the fixed blades, the faster the bow, the harder it is to get
Yeah.
tuned to fly consistently. And
Yes, it
that's
is.
why a lot of them, the faster bows going with mechanicals, because they don't affect the flight as much.
Yeah.
But then when you
Yeah,
get
I've
into
got,
crossbows, you got to have one rated for a crossbow, because
yeah.
a regular one for a compound is going to open them up, and then you lost
Well,
the advantage of having them. So
I've actually got one that is rated for a compound. I've shot it on a crossbow and it's never opened up on me.
oh yeah,
I have a 400 foot per second. I'm using a dead ringer,
oh yeah,
and they stay
yeah,
pretty closed. It's got a thicker rubber or band to hold the
oh
blade
okay,
down. So that makes a big difference.
yeah, that makes a big difference.
Yeah.
There's some of the ones really not designed for that. They're not going to be that strong,
No, they're not.
and and if you have it too strong, then your lower poundage bows won't open them,
No,
efficiently when they hit.
which way the bows now are nowadays in compound, even the lower poundage. I mean, I'm
Yeah,
shooting 60 pounds on a compound. I'm looking to drop it another 5 pounds. I've got one bow set up in there at 56, and I shot a mechanical out of it, and it opened up.
yeah.
So it's, I
Like I
mean, the
said,
way,
more shot placement than
yes, it is.
anything else. As long
Yeah.
as it's razor sharp, that's the big thing: shot placement and a razor sharp broadhead.
And as long as your arrows fly pretty
Yeah,
decent and not going all over the place, being right spined is a key to about everything.
yeah. I know my first deer, I was 20 feet up in the air. It was 40 yards away, and I was shooting my bow. It was 52 pounds. Now I got to remember, this is in the probably the 70s,
Mm-hmm.
or early 80s. So they weren't, no fast bow or anything. And I was shooting a full length 2117 arrow with 145 grain tip. And when I shot, that deer turned around, my arrow was hanging almost all the way out. I think the fletching stopped it from going clean through.
Oh, wow.
And that's 52 pounds with a big, heavy arrow. So it was
Yeah.
not flying very fast.
No, it doesn't. It's usually momentum and velocity are two different things. If you got enough for momentum to work, you got to have enough weight to push through the object that you're shooting at. And usually with a heavier arrow going slower, it usually will go through about anything. I mean,
Yeah.
the deer I shot a couple of years ago, it was shot with a Bob Lee Black Hawk with carving limbs, and it's their version of a super curve, but with 506 grains and a 3-blade. And I was shooting a 3-blade Woodsman Elite broadhead, and it went slam through the deer. It was sticking in the ground when it passed through. So it's a lot of it has a lot to do with the weight and some people, it depends on where you hunt at and what you're trying to accomplish. So I don't hunt in the Midwest, so I don't really need a lighter arrow for flatter flight. All I got to do, I mean, my farthest shot on average with compounds are 15 yards. I can get within 15 yards of about any game most of the time. So that's why I shoot a little bit heavier. I like to be between 425 and 450, which seems to be a pretty good happy medium, but definitely anything over 400 is good for me hunting here.
Yeah, my hunting arrows, when I had my shop, they were PSC come out with what they called their hunter shaft, which is a 7,000 straightness. So I got some in just to try it.
Yeah.
And so I ordered some in, supposed to be a 300 spine. The way PSC does them, there's 100, 200, 300, 400. And the higher the number, the stiffer the spine.
Yep.
Kind of reverse of what a lot of the other ones do. And they
Yeah.
were supposed to be, the arrows I got in was supposed to be 300 spine. They come in 400 spine. So they were heavier.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so they were heavier, and my normal arrow runs about 360, 370 as
Okay.
far as grains with the 100 grain tip on there. And shooting out a 70-pound bow, they zing pretty good. But
Oh,
my
yeah.
hunting bow, when I got ready to replace those, I had to put weight tubes in them to get them the same weight, so I didn't have to change my pins too much.
Oh, yeah.
Otherwise, I got to completely change all my pins.
Oh, yeah.
And so I tried to match the weight as close as I could, so I didn't have to, just kind of tweak the pins a little bit. And so my hunting arrows now have weight tubes in them. So once I'm done with those arrows, I'm going to have to re-sight in because I don't have any more weight tubes.
Yeah, that's the only downfall to hunting heavier arrows compared to a little bit lighter setups. You have to be mindful of your distance with that little bit heavier of an arrow. And usually what I'll do, if I've got one arrow right now set up at about 430 grains, I'll get my 20 sighted in. Once I get all my pin sighted in, I'll see how far that 20 pin will shoot and move back in 1 yard increments where it's still within reason of in my little kill zone that I want to put it in, until it drops completely out. So I know that distance I'm good out to, say, 23 yards with a 20-yard pin. Then I can make my adjustments and go to 30 and do the same thing before I have to kind of split pins and all that. So I'm pretty familiar with what my setup does before I even go to the woods.
Well, and there's a couple different ways you can set your pins up. One, you can set one for 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, or you can say, okay, I'm going to put this pin right in the center of, the kill zone. So like you're shooting a 5 spot. I'm going to put the pin right in the center on the X, and I want it to hit at the top of the white, stay within that 5 spot. And I'm going to move back until it hits the bottom. Then I'm going to set my next pin where I'm aiming in the middle and it hits at the top, and then move back and get to the bottom. So now you have basically a close pin and a far pin.
Yeah.
So you have 2 pins, and it's like, okay, if it's close, I use the top one. I'm within the kill zone. And then the next one, it's a little further. I've never set them up that way because being an engineer, I like a little more specific.
Yeah.
I don't like that. Well, it's close. If I want to aim at the X, I want it to hit the X, and so I set one up for 20, one up for 30. And if it's 25, I just stick it between the 2 of them. And, I've learned with my bow that I can I can look at the deer, like on the picture, I can put one pin here and then you see where the other pins, down at the belly. I can kind of use that. If, the 20 and the 40-yard pin are all on the deer, I know, it's a close pin, So if I get where I can't do that, now I know I got to move up and up and up. And so I can kind of use my pins as a rangefinder.
Yeah.
I don't do that very often because, I got used to judging yardage, and I just judge yardage. So, okay, this is a 30-yard shot, or this is a 35-yard shot. And I just go, pick the spot that I want and shoot it. And then a couple of years ago, I actually got a rangefinder. And last year, I didn't use it for archery. But when we were setting up tree stand, it's like, okay, I ranged it. So I know, okay, I know that's a 30-yard shot out to that row of trees. And if they're out in the middle of the field, well, you kind of figure out where that's at. And I know, therefore, when I first started out, because I wasn't as good at judging yardage, I actually had a 30-foot rope with me. And I'd stick at the base of the tree and go out 30 feet and put something to mark it. And
Yeah.
then I'd pull her open. I'd go out, okay, so there's 10 yards, there's 20 yards, you know, and then, you know, then I wasn't as good at this longer ranges. So it's like, okay, I just know, is it within 20 yards? Because that's what I'm going to shoot. I'm not going to shoot way out there. You know,
Right.
at that time, I was just starting out. My skills weren't good enough to make those shots. And, you know, now I can, but I can't see very well out that far. You know, I start getting out there, you know, the 30-40 yard shots. And it's like, okay, my pins are all blurry. I can't figure out which pins is which, you know?
Yeah. Most time I'm hunting thicker cover anyway. So 30-40 yard shots are out of the question. Some places you're lucky to get a 10-yard shot. It's so
Yeah.
thick, you know, and but open fields, stuff like that, at field edges, yeah, 20 yards, 30 yards is good enough. I kind
Yeah.
of did the same like with how I did my pins with my recurve, holding at a certain point and keep it inside of my little kill zone that I wanted to keep it in, which for me, I try to stay within right inside of 3 inches, have a 3-inch group. If I have a 3-inch group from up close out to 25 yards, it's good enough. That's enough for your margin of error to be a lot less,
Right.
about an inch and a half margin of error from center either way. And that's pretty much how I look at it. I try to reduce my margin of error with anything I use by, you know, just shrinking it down, because all you really need for a deer is cantaloupe size. And you start with a
Right.
cantaloupe, that's, you know, 4 or 5 inches, then you're going to end up having a lot more margin of error. So I try to small as I can see and try to get the margin of error down as low as I can get in that case.
Yeah, and you talked a little bit about you know, technique where you go up close and you shoot, you know, and then you start stepping back. You know, that's a good practice technique where you go up and, you know, say if you're shooting a 5-spot or single spot, whatever, you know, one of the blue and white targets,
Yeah.
and you shoot, and it's like, okay, let's start off with how close do I need to get so I can always hit the white, you know, and then you move back. It's like, okay, I'm back to 20 yards, I'm still hitting, I'm at the 30, I missed, now I go back up to your 10 yards and keep going. That helps your mind in figuring out, you know, that you can hit it. You know, it's training you to think that you can hit it. And then once you get back, you know, say, okay, I want to get good out to 40 yards. Now you keep it in the white. Now you move up and it's like, okay, now I'm going to start with the X ring. I'm going to shoot the X ring until I move back. I miss it. Now then I go back and keep going back. And next thing you know, you're at 40 yards and you're hitting that 1.5-inch circle.
Yeah. By
And
doing that, is, believe it or not, your mind is a good rangefinder. It'll remember
right,
everything, especially with recurve or any type of vertical bow. You get muscle memory, and usually your subconscious will always picks out the good stuff. It don't ever pick out anything bad. Once you hit a target, it takes a picture of it and where
right,
you're going to hit it. And a lot of times people will fight themselves, like having a front seat and a back seat driver. The back seat drivers try to run the guy in the front, and that's where you
right.
start problems. And basically all that practice you did, you're fighting against yourself. And that's how I've missed shots on game, or even missed targets that way, instead of just letting the subconscious take over from all that practice, and just shoot and relax, try to be as relaxed as possible. And to be able to be relaxed in a hunt situation, you just got to be in that situation a lot
Yeah,
for you to get used to it. And I still get kind of excited even with fawns coming in. I enjoy watching the fawns come in and watching them, and watching other younger deer come in, and just kind of watching, see how they act, how much they really pay attention. So it kind of learn things, whether you shoot something or not, you learn on how to hunt them the best way, because they do pay attention. Because here in North Carolina, everybody hunts out of a tree stand. If you make any least little wrong movement, they will look up at you. And I've had to move a tree stand and had a deer come in and look at the tree I was in. And it's amazing how they remember that stuff, and they will constantly look up, and if they see any type of weird movement or something out of the ordinary.
Yeah, I know there's a place around here that a lot of people hunt, and the deer are trained to look up in the trees. So,
Yeah.
If they see, don't have to see any movement. They just see a strange bump on the tree, they look up at it. They're trained that they have predators above them, and they look. And, fortunately I've never hunted there, but, I hunt more wilderness type ones where you don't have lots of people out there. And so they're not trained. I have one of our state parks has archery in there. You can do archery or shotgun, for birds. And, they're used to people all the time. There's people in there all the time, because it's a camping area.
Yeah.
And so they aren't really bothered too much by, people. They'll move around out of their way, and it's not like they're paranoid and they go running around, but they will snort at you if you've done something that, creates a smell they're not used to.
Yeah.
I did that once, not even thinking about it. I went out hunting in the morning, went home and mowed the grass, come back, and it's like, didn't even think about it. The fact that, I smelled like gas, and here about 100 yards downwind from me, this deer's snorting because it smelled a strange smell.
Yeah.
It's like, man, time to leave now. It's like, I didn't even think about it, when you go home. And I just did something, went back that afternoon, and
They're amazing. They're amazing animals to hunt, that's for sure. With their nose and how they pay attention to a lot of details. There can be a tough animal to hunt. You don't learn their habits, for sure.
So what's been your most challenging hunt?
My most challenging, I would say, I don't know. I would say probably hunting with a recurve was probably the most challenging, most fun. Because if you mess up, it's you. It's not no bow equipment or anything of that matter. You screwed the shot up. So there's so many different variables that go into it, because now you're shooting with fingers and shooting with no sights. And I started developing, after a little bit, gap shooting. That helped me out quite a bit. So, which I already had some split vision anyway, because I do see my arrow, I do see my hand on my riser, I see everything. And some people I talk to, I don't see anything but the target, and everybody sees something different in their sight picture, and they have to adapt to what their sight picture is to be hitting their target pretty successfully. And hunting with a recurve, it's definitely, you get excited. There ain't no draw stops, there ain't no back wall. You can pull that thing back around your back of your head if you can get it back there. If you get excited, all that adrenaline, you end up pulling way back, and you end up, missing or whatnot. But it's probably the most challenging. But once you get everything down pat, you basically, your anchor point's your draw stop, back wall.
Right.
And you just do a little bit of back tension. It shouldn't take a lot of movement with that to get the air to be able to get a good release. But it took me a while to learn back tension. I was learning it on a recurve or longbow, and that back tension, it'll help you come off straighter with the arrow. Because I can tell if I missed left or right, I knew what I did. It's just, like I said, it takes a lot of practice, a lot of blank belling to fix that problem. And I even bought a trainer, archery trainer, to where you just tie it. It's kind of like a heavy duty 550 cord, and you hook it to your bowstring, but you can't, and just set it up enough to where you can't grab the string. Now you got to use your back to draw the bow. That was challenging. And especially you can do it on a release, because it'll make you keep tension backwards instead of creeping forward. I had that problem. So using that fixed a lot of those problems, because if you creep a
Yeah.
little bit forward when you release, that thing will just like pull you to it,
Yeah.
scare the crap out of me. And once I started getting used to that, I started doing a lot better and going over my form and getting my fundamentals down. That's probably the most important thing. Everybody wants to get to shooting good right off the bat, but there's a road of processes you got to go through to be able to shoot good.
Yeah, I know when I was learning back tension, it was with compounds, and there was, back in 95 is when I learned it. And before that, I'd heard people talk about it. It's like, well, how do you know when you shoot if you don't know when it's gonna go off? And I just didn't understand it until, I learned it. And it's like, oh, I see. How do you know what you're gonna hit if you know when it's gonna go off?
Yeah.
And and I look at too, some of the podcasts talked about, target panic, with a wrist strap is caused by pulling the trigger.
Yeah.
Because if you know when it's going to go off, you can have target panic. And now if you don't know what's going to go off, you can't have target panic because you don't know when it's going to go off. You're just aiming. Yeah. And, I've done that many times, a new shooter, and it's like, okay, your whole job is to draw the bow back, store energy, and aim, because I'm pulling the trigger when I want to pull it.
Oh,
And
yeah.
most, majority of the time, 9 times out of 10, they hit the spot they're aiming at. They're like, that
Yeah,
you did it, now you can do it again.
Yeah, they don't have time to brace for that initial shock with back tension. You don't know when it's going to go. You're just trying to concentrate on what you're trying to hit, and it just miraculously goes off. Like with shooting traditional equipment, I just get enough around the string to make a hook. I don't try to squeeze it any more than I have to. It's just my hand's pretty relaxed. I get it in my first digits and just start pulling. That it ain't coming out. I just get all the way back to my anchor and start. Once I get everything settled, and it just happens. I just don't try to anticipate it. I just try to concentrate on where I want to hit. And usually it goes off within 2 seconds. And that's about what you want, because you can't. What I heard from Rod Jenkins was a trained mind can only concentrate for 2 seconds. That's a trained mind. So now you're trying to put somebody that's not used to that, and they may be shooting within a second. And it took me a while to be able to shoot and hold it 2 seconds. And instead of just letting it off as soon as I got to anchor and I felt settled, and I was about a second and a quarter. Now I can get back and hold it for a little bit. It does make a difference if you can get back and hold. And a lot of times with that, a lot of people are overbowed too.
Right.
That's another good way to get target panic. I mean, I hunted with 70 pounds on the compound for several years. And I watched a video one time of a 12-year-old kid. He dropped a big deer. And I'm thinking in my mind, why am I shooting this much weight? And I know he ain't shooting no more than 50 pounds if he's got that. And he just dropped the deer, a big buck, big deer, right dead about where it stood. So that's what got me thinking about draw weight and be able to get my bow back and get back smoothly without being detected.
Right.
And that's a big key when you got about 4 or 5 deer in there. And that's 5 sets of eyes in there looking at you. One wrong movement, one of them will blow you out and you're done.
Right. And that's one of the things, like, when setting up, the draw weight, if you can't drop back slowly straight to your anchor point, it's too much weight. If you have to do one of those, you lean way back and then pull into it. And it's like, if you got to do that to draw, then you're going to bust you every time.
Oh, yeah.
You're shooting too much weight.
Especially here. It don't take but one wrong movement and they'll just all be looking at you.
Yeah.
And
I've seen some of the professional videos, hunting, and they're struggling. They're pulling across their chest, which is your weak muscles, not your back muscles. They're pulling across your chest and then raise up. Well, that's not your strength, is across your chest, because now you're using your arms. Bring up, use them back muscles.
Yeah.
And then I've seen it with the finger above the trigger. These are on the videos, hunting videos, and then they just slam on the trigger. It's like, dude.
Yeah.
You need to pay me to teach you to do it the right way. you know.
Well, a lot of them is weight is key, speed is key, but uh, I started watching Olympic archery. The
Oh yeah.
guys shooting recurve shooting, 70 meters. And those guys, the Korean national team, one of their coaches made a statement is like on the arrows, they were using 125 grain tips. And he said a slow 10 is better than a fast 8. And
Yeah.
and that stuck with me, with that little bit, a slower, lighter poundage bow. And a lot of them people were shooting 46, 43 pounds and shooting 70 meters and hitting the center X ring pretty 50% of the time at 70 yards, 77 yards.
Right.
So, I mean, they got something there. And that tell you, I mean, if I shot 50 pounds on my compounds, I wouldn't have an arrow left. I shoot better. It's just that mindset. Well, I got to have a little bit more weight, a little bit more speed. It's really not all about that. And in a lot of cases, if I wanted to do that, I'll just stay with my muzzle loaders. And I got one muzzle loader that'll shoot 2,500 foot a second right out of the gate right now. And archery's supposed to be challenging and fun, and that's the way I look at it. I try to get as close as I can because I'm really lazy and I don't want to have to walk as far to track my stuff. I just try to put
Yeah.
it down quickly as
Yeah.
possible.
Yeah. As we get older, I don't want to track them either. It's like if they can
Uh,
drop within sight, that's it. That's perfect.
That's perfect for me. And especially I have to walk and I got to come back the same distance plus go back to my car with the deer.
Yeah.
So I'd much rather be a little bit closer, and being closer, it'll actually help your success rate as far as getting harvest. Your harvest rate will go up. It'll be a higher percentage of harvest instead of trying to shoot a farther shot.
Yeah. When you kill the deer, you want to make sure you bring it back so you can eat it.
Yes, definitely.
Other animals will eat it. It's just, that's kind of a waste because that's why we went out to kill the deer is so that we can have food to feed our family. We
Yeah,
want to
that's what
feed the
I'm out
wild
there for.
critters. We want to feed our family,
Yeah,
not the animals' family.
that's what I'm out there for, is to eat. So the deer I shoot, I choose them because I want to eat, and I like the meat. I've eat deer meat coming up with friends that hunted and all that. So I've ate deer meat every which way you can think of, and I've got certain things that I like. So especially the deer sausage, that is some good stuff. I really enjoy that. And I got a guy that makes some, and he makes it has maple syrup in it, so it's kind of sweet.
Yeah.
So it's really good. So that's my whole enjoyment while I'm out there. And I usually help some other people out with some deer meat too. I've gave a lot of. I killed 4 deer last year, and a lot of it I've gave to people.
Yeah, that's what's nice when you can, you have plenty to feed your family, and then, you can help somebody else out and give them some, probably some of the best meat you can get.
Oh
You
yeah,
know,
definitely.
you know, you've got your deer, of course. Moose is a lot better meat.
I've never had
Yeah.
moose, but
Oh yeah. I went to Canada and got a moose. I went up to Ontario, went with a friend of mine, and it was rifle season. And yeah, I got the moose, and oh man, it was so good.
that's a lot of meat off one
Yeah,
moose.
yeah, it was a lot of meat. There was, a good 500 pounds of meat, with the bones and meat.
Yeah.
That's a lot by the time you field dress it out. And you
Oh
know,
yeah, that's usually a
I'm
lot of meat.
that just the head and hide was about 130 pounds.
Woo.
Yeah,
Wow.
that's nothing else, that's just the head and hide.
Yeah, that's usually what, one tag
Yeah, one
compared to
tag.
deer. I get 6 deer tags here, so we get quite $2 and 4 does.
Yeah, here we get that you can shoot a buck. You have 2 tags, whether it be 2 archery, 2 muzzleloader, a 2 rifle, or any combination. If you can shoot a buck, then you get 2 tags. But then there's also other tags that allow, for season choice. Get one of those, and those are separate from the other ones. Like if you
Okay.
get a season choice tag, you can shoot archery during archery season, rifle during rifle season, and muzzleloader during muzzleloader season. So it doesn't matter what season it is, you have to use the appropriate weapon.
Correct.
So you can't use a muzzleloader until muzzleloader season. Here in Nebraska, that's the month of December.
Okay.
But archery goes from September through the end of the year. And then rifles like 9 days in November and another 9 days in January. So you could shoot the bow all year round, the whole season.
Yeah.
Even during rifle season, except you have to wear the orange like the rifling because you're out with rifles.
Yeah.
But you can shoot even during muzzleloaders. The weird part is in Nebraska, and muzzleloader, you have to have the orange. Archers don't need the orange in the month of December. When muzzleloaders are out there. That's kind of a little bit different, but muzzleloaders aren't shooting those 300-400 yard shots, that most archers aren't going to be able to take and don't want to take and won't take. There are a few archers out there that have the skill to shoot them 100-yard shots and make good shots on them. But they practice the 100, 150 yards all the time.
Oh yeah.
100 yards away, I can't see that far.
Yeah.
I can't see good to see deer.
I used to practice at 80 to 100 just to make my closer hunting shots easier.
Oh yeah.
And I would just sit out there and just drill them, try to drill as tight as group as I could. I found the further I was out, I did some testing on heavier versus a lighter arrow setup. A heavier arrow will travel further and it will hold energy a lot more out to further distances. And I was shooting a 470 grain Easton Axis. Then I had another one that was a lot less, about a gold tip that was about 402, 403. And when I got out to 80 yards, it wasn't even hardly moving the 3D target. And I was still knocking antlers off my 3D target with a 470 grain arrow at 80 yards.
Yeah.
It was hitting it pretty hard. So that's stuff like that, little things. Most people, well, you can't tell the difference at 20 and 30 yards. No, you can't. It's just speed. But it's still a heavier arrow is going to hold from 0 on out to 80 to 100 yards.
It holds a little more kinetic energy. And and I like that, to explain the difference between a light arrow and a heavy arrow. You have a brick wall. You have a Volkswagen at 70 mile an hour, hits the brick wall. What's it do? Volkswagen explodes. You get a semi, drive the same speed at the same wall. What happens? The wall disappears.
Yeah.
Now, truck still gets damaged, but it goes through the wall.
Especially loaded down.
Oh, yeah.
You got a load behind it. That's a big difference.
Yeah, you don't stop them. It's hard to stop a heavier arrow. That's why a lot of people like to use them. But I've got, when I had my store, I had the PC arrows is what I shoot. So I was a PC dealer, so I have lots of them. And when I closed the store, I just kept all my Comp Pros, which is the 1000 straightness carbon arrows. Yeah. And in the 300 spine, which I use for my 70-pound bow, they figure out with a 100 grain tip right about the 370 grain, and shoot out a 70-pound bow is, I find for me, when I was shooting a 60-pound bow, I come back, I lock into my form better at 70 because it's that little extra force forced me to lock into my form a little bit better than a little bit lighter weight. So for me, shooting to 70 pounds, I would lock into my form more consistently, because I had to pull harder on it.
Yeah. I know a lighter bow, even in shooting traditional, most guys, the older guys, would shoot heavier. We'll use Howard Hill. I think his average bow was about 90 pounds. And he was a great shot. Fred Bear shot 60, 65 pounds. He wanted that quick release. So with a heavier bow, tension on your fingers, it's easy to get rid of it. But with a lighter poundage bow, you do have to have, it's a whole different animal when you're going from heavy to a lighter bow. You have to actually learn how to shoot a lighter bow to be able to be good with it than with a heavier. And everybody's different when it comes to that. I couldn't even I can pull 52 pounds back. I think I could pull 60 on a recurve. I've never tried it, but 52 is pretty easy. I can get back to my anchor, but it's draw weight's a choice, but I choose a little on the light. I'd rather be a little bit on the lighter side. So if I'm sitting for a while, it's not a guarantee the deer's going to come in. First 5 minutes I'm in stand. So especially cold weather, if I'm hunting with archery equipment, I want to be able to get that bow back. Because I know what it feels like not be able to get a bow back on a deer that's standing right there perfectly in front of you.
Same here. I would tell you, I was doing a lot of shooting in the summertime and, going to 3Ds and stuff. Come hunting season, I pretty much didn't shoot.
Yeah.
Well, we're in, I forget, like late November, December sometime. I'm in my tree stand and I go to draw back my bow because I always like to draw it back when I get in the tree stand, make sure everything is good. And I'm trying to draw it back and I'm struggling. I cannot get it back. I finally get it back. After waiting a while and taking a break, I was finally able to draw it back. But in the process, I hurt something because I hurt for about a week. And it's like, I shoot this weight all the time. And what I hadn't been doing is keeping up some practice time and going through the motions. I was lost enough strength and cold. Once I warmed up, I just drew back, no problem.
Yeah.
It's, the first time getting a tree stand, it just didn't work. So, come archery season, it's nice to keep doing some kind of practice, even if you just have a bale in your basement that you pull, draw back and shoot.
Oh yeah, you got to be able to get your bow back. If you don't shoot the muscle that you had, you're gonna lose it. You got to redevelop it, and that's why I much rather shoot a little bit lighter bow with a little bit heavier of an arrow, and that way I can get it back. It's not a struggle. I mean, I can get back without being detected, no matter if the deer's looking dead at me, because being able to draw in one fluid motion is a lot better. Like the video I seen with Ted Nugent talks about that. I mean, he's a big thing on draw weight. His wife only shoots 38 pounds, and she's killed game in Africa and all that. And they said they've always recovered her animals, and I think he shot 48 for a long while and shooting some pretty good size animals. So it's a lot of it's, again, each person's going to have to draw weight's a choice. I mean, I'm not going to rag somebody because they shoot 70, 80 pound bow, but once I watched that video of that kid shooting, and I was shooting a lot less, at least 30, 25, 30 pounds less than I was, and he dropped a big deer. It's like, that's why am I struggling with it? And the older I get, I want it to be more comfortable and enjoyable to shoot.
Right.
Not a workout,
Yeah.
I just want it to be more enjoyable. So, and it helps you, with your practice, you're a lot more accurate when you can hold it steady instead of you're worn out by the time you get the bow back and you're all tired. Now you can't hold steady, so you can't hit what you're aiming at. So.
Yeah, and there's been times when, because when I was shooting 70 pounds all the time, I'd do the 300 round, and my scores actually went up the further I went. Even though I'm getting more tired, it's like my scores are going up.
Oh wow!
It's like weird, that my last group is better than my first group, and then.
Yeah, on my case, if I do that, my scores will get worse as more I went on, and that's why I dropped my bow weight down several years ago, right before I sold my last compound. I had a Bear Arena 34, and it was set at 60 pounds, and I shot a deer with 62 pounds, shot slam through it, and the arrow didn't deflect off no ribs. It just went straight in, straight out, hit the ground the way it come out of the bow. No deflections, no nothing. It blew through everything. I shot it with a 100 grain slick trick standard. And so that's why I ended up staying at a lower poundage. And actually, one of my deer I shot last year with one of my compounds set with 56 pounds. And I shot it with a Muzzy 1 broadhead 100 grain, and both my shoulders were bloodshotted. And I shot it quartering away.
Yeah.
Because the processor, when I took the deer there, they said, well, your shoulders are shot. I'm like, what? I'm going, I ain't got but a 56 pound bow set up to 56 pounds. He said, come on in here. I looked down, they're both bloodshot, all tore up. I couldn't believe it. So that's why these newer bows now, with the technology, you can get by with a lot lesser weight and
Oh
still get
yeah.
the same performance. I mean, it's unbelievable how far they've come along.
Well, with the
And
older bows, a lot we put overdraws on them.
yeah,
Because the brace height's, like 8 inches, and we put
oh
overdraws
yeah,
on them. So that arrow is actually behind the riser.
yeah,
And the only problem with that is I've seen guys put broadheads through their hand because the arrow fell off and they didn't know it. And it was behind their
oh
hand. So whenever I set up a bow, I'm going to set it so the tip of that arrow is in front of the riser. So if it
yeah,
falls off, the arrow is sitting on your hand, not the tip. And it's like, well, I want it shorter. It's like, okay, draw back. Now, just what happens if this arrow comes off and it's sitting on your hand and the tip is kind of stuck into your hand a little bit? You can't draw back. What
mm-mm.
do? How do you let down? Well, if it's in front of your hand, you just let down and you're okay. I wouldn't
Yeah,
shoot because it probably smack your hand, but um, there's like when I set them up, there's a lot of things I look at, for safety. It's like, why do I have the arrows there? And how do I put your position so that your arm doesn't get smacked? Set your draw length right, and
yeah,
when you draw back, and ladies have other problems. Some guys, that's why they wear the chest protectors, because they come back and a string rubs across your chest. Even the guys wear them. And, so you always have to look at that. So whenever I'm teaching a, lady, I was like, okay, draw back, do not shoot. I want to check and make sure, the
yep,
new shorter bows, you don't have a problem with them because the string is such a sharp angle.
yeah.
But, back when I started, the bows were, 36, 38 inches.
Oh
So,
yeah,
but like a recurve, you draw back and, the string is clear back here and it lives way down there. So it runs across you. So, you always got to make sure you're looking at that and where you're at. And,
oh yeah, definitely.
there's a lot of things you got to look at for safety before you even say, don't shoot, just pull back and hold. And then I'll let you know, make sure and go through all the safety things, make sure your arm is not cocked in,
Hmm.
and it's like, okay, you need to let down, you need to fix something. And, I
Yeah, that's
kind of
what I like.
teach the whole process, from your grip, and there, I use the same grip on my compound as I do on the recurve,
Yeah,
just because that's my grip, that's my arm, that's my position, and I draw back. I anchor my index finger, the corner of my mouth is where I anchor to.
mhm,
And I know this here a while back, I heard talking about string walkers. It's like,
yeah,
what is a string walker? So I had to do some research on it. And
yeah,
basically, it's the concept of moving your hand down on the string when you draw.
yeah.
I'm
You're
like,
changing the pitch of the arrow to hit where you
yeah.
want to. Yeah, it's highly accurate. I've messed around with that, and it is very highly accurate. I just can't get my big nose out of the way, so I I'd set up uh my bow to shoot what they call a fixed crawl. If and I had to set up a guy not too long ago uh, on that at an archery shop because he's wanting to try to recurve and he was having trouble getting his groups. I said, well, I can set you up on a fixed crawl and you just put your arrow point dead on the animal and had him at. I asked him what his point on was. Point on distance is about 30, 35 yards. It's like, good Lord, no wonder you're going to end up shooting over an animal. And shorten it up, set him up with it. And a fixed crawl is basically gap shooting and string walking combined, but you're going to a fixed point instead of being normal at the bottom of the knot. You're spaced down, maybe depending on the person, it might be 3/4 of an inch down. You're just placing there, and all you got to do for close shots, you're going to aim a little high. Say 20 yards is your point on. You're putting the point dead center. There's no thinking involved. You're always on that animal to make that shot. So that's a whole nother ball game, but it is
Yeah.
highly accurate. The aiming techniques are very highly accurate. I shot instinctive, but I shot split vision. So I did kind of use my air tip for reference, and it's there, and some guys would, especially hardcore instinctive archers, they say, well, if you're going to use your tip, you might as well just shoot a rifle or go to a compound. Well, it's there. You've got the same thing. I mean, and
Yeah,
that's
that kind of describes me as like, I don't use the tip or anything. It's like, okay, I'm starting reference, because if you pull back to here, and then you pull back just a little bit further, you're putting more power in it, and the tip moves, and it's just too much variation with my mind to get around. So when I do it, I look at where I want the arrow to go, and I draw back, and I shoot. I don't, I don't do a lot of shooting a recurve anymore, but that's how I do it, is I just look at the target and work on training my body to hit that, different distance, move it around a little differently. And but
oh yeah,
that's just me.
I try to have a little bit more tools in my toolbox that I can reference to and use, and to help me be a little bit more accurate. If I wasn't sure on a shot, I can gap shoot. I know my gaps with my arrow set up, and there's a certain gap that I can hold. I can put my arrow tip, say when I got 3D targets, I'll reference on that was the deer target, and I try to get a smaller deer target, so that way it's about realistic size of a deer that most people are going to see, and I would put my point on where I want it to go and see where it impacts, and then I make adjustments from there, and that's helped tremendously. Now, if I got close shots, pretty much instinctive, but I'm getting a little bit further back, and I'm not real sure, because I get too excited, you forget a lot of stuff. So I'll just use it as a reference, get lined up and shoot. And everybody has their own style, and a lot of guys are got somebody that's gap shoot, so try to pull a guy that trying to teach him how to gap shoot, and he may not be mentally set up that way to do it. I just had a guy here several weeks ago that's wanting to get his arrows tuned, but he couldn't shoot his recurve consistently. So most of that I've cut off was a 1/4 inch. So I started grabbing extra arrows I had, and then helping him and trying different tip weight, because he had some Easton full metal jackets, and those things, I know I've wasted a whole dozen arrows tuning because I mistuned on my own. I definitely didn't want to do it with his, especially I couldn't get a good reading on what he was trying to do. So I just worked on his form and gave him some advice, and I checked on him just like the other day and said he was doing a lot better. So, I mean, I can give everybody all the information they can get to get started, but they got to put it to practice to be able to get to where they need to get to as far as body wise, and they know their body better than I do. So it takes a lot of practice. And I've got a YouTube channel, which it's basically, I had problems when I started in trying to get to shooting well. I just figured I'd help some people get over that learning curve, and it might help them out. And it's just basically a starter. And I had one video, I said, if you do this, you'll shoot accurately. And I had more views off that. They're trying to find one video that's going to fix their problems instead of going out there and practicing. So
yeah, if your form's not right, it doesn't matter how the arrows are tuned, because your form's, if you don't have a consistent form, it doesn't matter what your arrows are doing.
Yeah, you get all types of people. Some people, like, and I heard one primitive archer say, calls it form archery, but he's the same person's got form too. He's doing the same thing every time to get the results he wants. He's got, quite a bit of big game kills, but everybody's got some type of form. We just call it bad or good, but not everybody has the same flexibility, and all that. So I try to help if I was going.
And when I teach, I've been an archery instructor since '95. But when I teach, this is the way I do it. This is what works best for me. I'm going to teach you that and then modify it, because your body's not like mine.
Right.
When you're shooting your compound, because you probably you could teach more about recurves than I can, because I don't do a lot of shooting of them.
Yeah.
I can teach the basic stuff when you start doing the string walking or the gap shooting, I don't do that. So I have a little more trouble doing that. I just say, Well, if you want to learn string walking, Jake Kaminsky, he Olympic archer, he follow
Yeah,
his videos. I look at his, that's like string walking is like, so I watched his videos to see what is this, because some people ask and it's like, I need to know, because I will teach you, traditional bows, but I'm going to teach you the way I shoot them. And you want to learn other stuff that's like, I don't know. So at least now I know, okay, I know the concept on there. And if I really need to teach it, I'm going to go watching all these videos and then I'm going to start playing with it and figure it out,
yeah,
and it's like, okay, here's do it. But, for, for compounds, I teach a specific way of doing it. I hold my recurve the same way I do my compound, with the hand going between your thumb
hmm,
and index finger down between the two meaty parts of your hand, right?
yeah,
Kind of like the lifeline. Um,
yeah,
and, I went through, the high wrist where you're pointing your hand, your wrist is straight and all that. And it's like, and because I did martial arts for 20 years, the time I was doing archery and martial arts, and when I learned how to shoot, back tension release, and then I kind of incorporated the two together because, in martial arts, your power is directed straight to your target through your target.
correct.
And so I teach archery the same way. When that bow goes off, I don't have a locked arm because you can't control where it goes.
No, you cannot.
And your shoulder goes up. So drop the shoulder down, little bend in the arm, and by going through, that meaty part, it turns that elbow out so you don't smack your arm. If you're smacking your arm, drawing's too long, or you're
Oh,
really forcing the wrong grip. So now when I teach it, I want that hand to point straight to your target. When you're done shooting, that hand should be pointing where your arrow went. If it's not, then something's wrong with your form.
yeah,
That's the most efficient way to go. You see a lot of them, they'll take, and instead of being straight off the side like this, they're off like this,
yeah,
their hand. So what happens when you go off, your hand goes to the outside.
correct. Yeah,
And you can't consistently do that. There's some that do it, but it's a whole lot more work. And I had just like, no, you don't want to point your toes straight to your target. You want to have open stance. And they're like, okay.
I have a slightly open stance because of a hunting. Even with a recurve, I had an slightly open
Right,
stance. That's the best way, especially with bulky clothes. You got to have string
right.
clearance.
And
Uh,
that's why I shoot a little bit shorter draw length.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I'm
What?
shooting my actual, well, a little bit shorter. My actual draw length's 28 3/4. I'm shooting a 28.5 on draw length. So with a recurve, it's 27 inches. It's a little bit shorter than my actual draw length is on a compound. But shooting fingers, it is going to shrink for
Right.
at least an inch, 2 inches, at that. But yeah, I've been clipped with a recurve with my bear grizzly, and it's 43 pounds for me. And that thing will rub you raw and hit you in the same spot if you don't make the right correct adjustments. It's painful. And it's a
Yeah.
bad way to learn, but usually pain usually gets in your head and you learn what you learn pretty quick and you try to avoid all that
Yeah.
unnecessary pain.
Yeah. Every time I see somebody post a picture of their arm, they smack the arm, my comment is drawing's too long.
Yeah.
Drawing's too
Or
long,
you got,
guaranteed. Or
yeah,
you're really forcing your arm in a wrong grip. You almost have to, instead of doing normal, you have to kind of almost turn your hand in where it goes along your knuckles.
yeah.
If you do that, you're going to smack it every time. But
Oh, yeah.
even if your draw length's right, but most people don't do that. And one of the things I like to, explain is like when I start teaching somebody on how to proper hand grip, I'm going to ask if they had any martial arts training. Because if they say no, then okay, I go on. But if they say yes, think a heel palm strike. Because what do? You strike with this part of your hand, because
Yeah.
that is where all the force goes. If you're pushing your bow with that part of the hand, it's connected all the way through your whole shoulder.
Yep.
And one of the things that we do in martial arts is, if you take your hand, you push on its center, it just goes back. But if you push on the side, your hand wants to turn, or your hand wants to turn. If you push top, it wants to go back. That's the only
Yep.
place you can push on your hand if the hand doesn't want to move. So if that's where you're at, your hand is completely relaxed, it's not going to move. You know,
Correct.
and it's gripping bows too. You put, well, grip that bow. I've seen people have that bow
The
is
depth
capable of
grip.
doing a perfect paper tear.
Yeah.
You know, at that 7 foot mark or whatever it is, perfect paper tear. But yeah, they got a depth grip and they have a bad tear.
Yeah.
And I had one was posted was like, I've always had a low tear. Can't get it out. No matter what you can't get it out. My comment was, well, have someone else shoot your bow. They're like, and if the tear is now low, just like it was before, then there might be something else we can start looking at. But there's so many
Oh, yeah.
things you can do. It could be your lower limb is too much weight or too little weight. You know, they might
Yeah.
be off. Even though you got them backed out the same amount, one might be weaker than the other.
It's
And that's one of the things to
possibility.
do when you totem is you might have to tweak that. You know, if your bow wants to kick out, maybe your bottom limb is too strong. You need to crank out a quarter of a turn, you know,
Yeah.
or an eighth of a turn, and weaken that bottom one and have them shoot like it's supposed to. That's one of the things when I used to do what I call the super tune, as I go through and we look at all that, as well as, you know, you adjust your sights, you know, those shooting compounds with sights. A lot of people don't realize use 3 axes of adjustment.
Oh, yeah, there is.
You have your left and right, and then as you tilt your bow down or up, does it still stay level? So the jig I have allows me to tilt that bow down and adjust that 3rd axis so the level's still level. Because if your bubble's off, you tilt down and you have to tilt your bow, because if you tilt it off kilter a little bit, now your pins are going in an angle. So as you move up, you're moving off the sides. Now you're shooting to the right or shooting to the left. And that's
Oh,
why
yeah,
adjusting that
definitely.
3rd axis is important, you know, on compounds. If
Yeah,
you're
it
going to
is.
be, you know, a lot of them, you don't have to worry about it. I use my level when I come back. I don't even look at it anymore, but I'll draw back, bubbles level. I don't look at it no more because I know my form is good and
Yeah.
everything else good. You know, some of your higher end bows will have that ability to adjust that axis, the 3rd axis. But
Yeah, I got a
generally you don't
sight.
really have to do much.
I got a sight that you can adjust the 3rd and 2nd axis. It's
Yeah.
a HHA Tetra.
Yeah.
And that thing is a pain in the butt to get it adjusted, but I've got a jig that adjusts it, and sometimes I just like don't even mess with it. I'll just look at the vertical pin. If I'm happy to have it on my bow, just get it. I can see straight up and down fairly well, and
Right.
I don't even have to worry about a bubble level. I just hold it straight up and down and just shoot, and it goes right where I'm putting my pin or whatnot. But that's the thing about, you know, shooting traditional. You don't have all that extra stuff,
Right.
so you have to kind of play with the can of your bow and all that to get to where you want to hit, especially up in elevated, uphill, downhill. It's a whole different ball game.
Yeah, it is.
Out.
That's things shooting up and down hills is, you know, gets a lot of people because they don't remember that 3, 4, 5 triangle and how to judge yardage along the horizontal. You don't judge the straight line distance. You have to judge the horizontal distance. And
Yeah.
that's, you know, I've said this many times in the podcast. I look, if I'm way up on high, I look at the trail and I find a tree that's on the trail and come up where it's level to me and I judge that distance.
Yeah.
I don't care how
Yeah.
far it looks like it is. And the animal can look like it's 40 yards away. But if that trail is 20 yards horizontal, you better shoot it for 20 yards,
Yeah.
not what it looks like. You know, so you can't use your pins like I talked about earlier to gap them because they're off, because you're 50 yards away or whatever it is, and they're actually only 20 yards away. And
yeah, that's the advantage with a traditional bow, especially somebody shooting a fixed crawl like that. Their point's always on the animal. It's just whether it's high, low. Closer the animal is, say, 10 yards, you're going to hold lower on the animal. The farther it goes, you're going to hold probably top of back. And that's with me with a 20 yard, 25 yard point on with that type of system. You always can keep, it's fairly simple, you know, close in, lower on the animal. Yeah, it's your distance at 20, dead on, a little bit further back, a little bit high. It's simple. There's no thinking to it. That's only 3 things you got to think about. Once you figure out where they're at, it's pretty much on there from there.
Is it a close, on, or a high? You know, is it close, medium, or long range?
Yeah.
And, we kind of talked about earlier, setting your pins, you've got your close pin and your far pin. So your
Yep.
close pin is good from wherever to wherever distance, and your far pin is from here on. So kind of like you're talking about there, you hold low on the animal if it's close, right on if it's the medium range, what you're set on for, and high there. So that makes it, simple. Just like, where am I at? I need to hold low, medium, or high.
Oh yeah. I like it simple. Simpler it is, the easier it is for me. The less thinking
Well,
I have to do.
and the same thing too, with in rifles you can do the same thing. I know my one rifle I have a Browning X belt in 30-06.
Hmm.
I'm dead on at 200 yards. I'm about 3 inches low at 300, and about an inch and a half, 2 inches high at 100. So that's kind of the same concept. Anywhere between this range and this range, I just put crosshairs where I want them to go,
Oh
or
yeah.
their tip, and shoot. Yeah, I don't care how far it is. If it's more than 300, I'm not going to shoot it anyway. Or
Yeah.
like in the case, if it's more than 30 yards, I'm not going to shoot at it, because I know the range and I know how steady I can hold. And um, as we get older, it's a little harder to hold steady, so you're going to bounce around a little bit more, and that kind of reduces your overall range. If you can, when you're younger, you can draw back and you can hold that pin where it stays, basically it floats around in the white on the 5 spot,
Yeah.
the 5 pointer. If it floats around there, you're good. And then next thing you know, you're tighter. Now it's basically floating around your X spot.
Yep.
And then as we get older, it's like, I can't hold that steady anymore. So
Yeah.
I'm it's like, okay, I'm gonna have to satisfied with hold it in the 5 spot, in the 5 ring. So you just have to, learn where you're at, adjust your effective range.
Yeah.
And
Definitely.
that's the thing too, when you have people that's shooting, say like they're at 20 yards, they're keeping it within the kill, maybe a 6-inch circle, because I haven't taught them how to shoot, or somebody else hasn't taught them how to shoot better.
Yeah.
And so now that's 20 yards. So now how far are they off if they're shoot 20-yard pin at 25 yards?
That'd be pretty good.
Yeah. And then what if it's actually 30 and you think it's 20 and actually 30? Now you
Yeah.
may not even hit it, because
Yeah.
you can't hold a tight enough group.
Yeah.
So, with something like that, your effective range of being able to shoot might be 10 yards or 7 yards, because of how big your group is and how off
Yeah.
you're on your yardage. Now, if you can hold them at 20 yards within, the X ring, an inch and a half circle, now then, if you're off by 5 yards, no big deal, because you're still within, your 6-inch kill zone.
Yep.
So
That's why I try to stay with the 3-inch from 0 out to wherever I'm hunting to. At the worst case scenario, if I can stay within 3 inches, I'm good. That's going to
yeah,
kill any big game animal in North America.
yeah. Well, and when you go out for the bigger animals, like your moose, the kill zone is about the size of a trash can lid.
Oh, I guarantee it. I still want a 3-inch group, no matter
Right.
what. That's because my margin of error ain't gonna be but an inch and a half. That's still good.
Yeah, that's
And
still good.
there's certain places on a whitetail, and if you're not holding, dead on the crease, if you're off that crease a little bit, that 2 inches you'll be liver shot, and you'll be waiting
Right.
for 4 to 8 hours for the animal to expire. So it does make a difference on your margin of error and practice. And the way I practice is I got a reason for what I'm doing, and why I'm doing it is because I want to shrink my margin of error and get the most effective shot I can.
Well, and if you get off enough and you hit that, there's one spot on the shoulder that your broadheads just do not pass through.
Yeah, the ridge of the shoulder blade.
Right.
Yeah,
I hit
you just,
one time, 70 pounds.
Yeah.
With my Muzzy broadhead, which Muzzy broadheads will stand up to a concrete block, because
Yeah.
I was tired shooting I had my store, and I actually stuck a Muzzy broadhead into a concrete block. I still have the broadhead, still use it.
Wow.
The shaft and the insert got cracked. The shaft broke back about an inch and a half. but that was at 70 pounds at 20 yards into a concrete block.
Mm.
And I found my arrow not too far after. There wasn't really much blood on it. And it was in a milo field. And Buddy and I, we kicked up one deer out of there. It run off, nothing wrong with it. And we stomped for about 3 hours that field, looking to see if there's anything in there. And that was the only thing it got up. It didn't really hurt it.
Hmm.
Yeah, that one spot, you would think a muzzy bridle, which is tough. I've shattered bones with them before.
Yeah.
And it still didn't penetrate that one spot on that shoulder.
I had a doe come in one time. I was shooting, I had a bear Montana. It was 52 pounds for me. I was shooting a grizzly single bevel broadhead, 200 grain. And doe come in. She was a good sized doe. She was about 15 yards. And she kind of looked up where I was at. So I just stayed still and got to thinking. And she kind of went about her business on it. So she's good. And she got broadside. And I drew back. And when I released, I had it was about a 500 grain arrow. That deer dropped down and rolled. And my arrow ended up hitting her in the shoulder right along that ridge. Never found my arrow. I looked for that deer for 7-8 hours all day, rest of the day, because I thought for sure she was done. And come to find out, it's just I hit right on that hardest part of the shoulder blade. And a single bevel is known for splitting bone. It didn't split that.
No,
It
there's
didn't
that one.
barely go in it.
It's like
So,
armor and plating in that one spot.
Yeah, it's real thick. It's an edging all the way around it.
Right.
It's thick and it's hard. I mean, you can get shoot in the middle of a shoulder blade, you can pop it just fine, but that's shooting a bit high. Shooting a bit high on it. Then, and what happened to me was something out of my control, because the animal's not going to stand there like a 3D target unless you shoot them all day long.
No.
they hear something, and I couldn't believe how low that deer dropped down. Her chest was almost touching the ground and rolling. I thought I rolled her, and she was still on. She was still on her feet and never tripped up and took off. I'm like, oh man. So I ended up spending a good part of my day till I figured, that deer ain't dead. And I got a neighbor property here. I know the guy that owns it. I told him my situation, and he said, yeah, you can go look. And I've tracked all around his property, never even found the deer. And I talked to somebody that was been an elk guy, mule deer guy. I'd say, yeah, you hit him in the shoulder, that deer would be fine. So I pulled so many broadheads out of shoulder blades because of that, off moose and different other type of animals. And he said that deer will be just fine. So it kind of gave me a little bit more peace of mind. But that's why when I practice, my purpose is to make a better shot,
right,
lethal shot, and quicker recoveries. So
yeah, that's definitely why we want to practice, so we have confidence we can hit what you're shooting at. And
oh yeah,
that's why I like shooting spots, because that develops your skill. I know I can hit what I'm aiming at. And then I like going 3Ds, because then I know I can judge the yardage. I know I can hit the spot. So I'm all ready. And when I was doing a lot of 3D shoots, I wanted to average an 8. If I average an 8 or better, then it was good. That meant I averaged at least a kill shot on every one.
Oh yeah.
And I talked about this on one of those podcasts that they have a term. And I think the hunter class, there should be a hunting hunter class, which is scored differently. There is no 5 points. It's minus 5 points.
Oh yeah, out of the kill.
So that means a wounded animal is minus 5, and then you get your 8 and your 10. So you could actually end up with a negative score.
I shot a 3D tournament at with a traditional, and if you didn't get it in the kill zone, it was a 0.
Yeah.
No score. And like, ooh.
Yeah.
I found out real quick. I wasn't all that at certain distances, and that stuff like that will help you find your effective range.
Right.
Because I'm not embarrassed to say, 8-10 yards. I mean, I had an 8-yard average. I mean, I was seeing stuff on deer like eyelashes, and they were pretty
Oh,
close. I even shot
yeah.
one at 5 yards, and whatever it takes for me to be accurate and be able to harvest what I'm hunting. And even with a compound, I'm not shooting. I don't think I've ever shot past 20 yards. I think maybe one time, but the rest of the time I've been within at least 15 yards in my
Yeah.
whole career of
Yeah.
it.
My first deer was 40 yards away.
Oh,
I've
wow.
never shot one that far since then. One deer I shot was up close and it went out 30 yards.
Hmm.
But everything else has been 20 and under. You know, when I
Yeah.
set up a tree stand, here's the trail. I try to find a tree 20 yards away.
Yeah.
And those darn deer refuse to go down that trail. They're always coming closer.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, they're coming underneath my tree stand and, 5 yards, 10 yards away. And um, I know the one time I had set up and there's a trail off in front of me and off to the right of me. And I heard this deer coming to the right of me. It's probably about a 10-yard shot.
Hmm.
And I shot and somehow I completely missed and hit the tree on the other side of it. I buried my broadhead into a tree. It
Yeah.
run towards me and turned around and said broadside, even closer shot. So I was able to get it,
Oh, wow.
because the sound was over to the right of it and I was the left of it. And so of course it's going to run away from the sound and then look back where the sound was and see what it was. And then
Oh,
another
yeah.
time out of the same tree stand, there's a deer come walking down the trail. And I drew back on it and I shot it and it started running off. And while I'm at full draw, I hear another deer coming down my trail that's in front of me, about the 20-yard trail away.
Mhm.
And so I shoot, watch where it goes. I know where it goes, turn around, load an arrow, draw back and wait for the other one to come out and shoot the other one. And then it run off. And it's like, now I got to track 2 deer and clean 2 deer and haul 2 deer out tonight.
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah. I got a little happy last year. I had some deer come in. I started shooting them, in which, with the tags we have, there ain't no daily limit. So I can shoot whatever tags I have that day. And I've had multiple shots on deer coming in. I mean, even after some being shot, and they'll come right back on in and I'll start ringing them out. And usually you get that. I've got that many. I think the most I've shot in one morning in an hour was 3 deer. They just come right in one after another. I just couldn't believe it. Most time I shoot one, they run off and I don't see another one. But here in the past several years, every time I shoot one, there's more coming in.
yeah,
So I always I had to learn to load my arrow off a mistake. Once I shot one, 'cause I got people that'll take the meat, so it's not going to go to waste if I didn't
right.
want. Uh, I do have people that will take it, and there's always something that I can do with the meat. So that wouldn't be an issue. But it seems like past several years I've had multiple deer come in after I've done shot one. So it makes it fun, but it makes a lot of work for you
Yeah.
dragging
Because
deer out.
do you process the meat yourself?
Uh, I have. I mean, by the time I drag one, I'm so tuckered out. I mean, I just turned 52, and I just take them to the processor and be done with it. Usually, if it's hot, I'm gonna get guts out first before I even
Right.
call it. And if a game warden in North Carolina hears me, that's what I'm gonna do. If it's like 95 degrees, I'm dropping guts. That meets my priority over
Right.
me getting the deer uh, tags and all that done. I'll do it after the fact, after I get the guts out, get the meat cooling down. But if it's cold, I'll call it in right there where I'm at, get my number, harvest ID number, and that's the way we do it.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
there ain't no physical tag that goes on the deer like it used to be here. So now you got to call it in and get a number. So now you got to have a pen handy on you
Oh,
to write it on your report card. So that way, when you take it to the processor, if you don't have the harvest number, they won't take your deer at all because they'll get in
oh,
trouble for it. They do.
right.
So
Because they need to have a number for them.
yes, and they got to have your information, your license number, and all that. So if something's a little messed up, they'll find out pretty quick. Or the processor won't take it, and they'll turn you in. if you
Right.
don't be upfront and honest about it, but normally if it's hot, I'm getting guts out of a deer before I would do anything, because you ain't got a lot less time. I try to
Oh
get the guts
yeah.
out in the first hour. If I can get it out quicker, I will. And it just gives you a lot better quality of meat. And it won't
Well,
have so much of a gamey taste to it when you start letting guts sit in there and heat build up.
yeah, it's well, and you're not off hunting more. You shoot the one, you find it, you get it gutted, and then call it in. I don't see why that would be a problem, but before you start dragging it out, you better have it called in.
Oh yeah. Yeah. All we got to do is we got to punch something, the date when we find it, we got to punch the date out on the card, and then
Right.
before we can even dismember it, it's got to be called in for that harvest ID for meat purposes. Guts, I can get them out. I ain't going to bat an
Yeah.
eye about it. So like I
Well,
said, that meets my first priority.
and they want to know, how many are killed, whether it's a doe, a buck, a fawn,
Yeah.
just so they can know what's the limit next year. Because if all of a sudden nobody's calling them in, now they're going to think there's a way bigger herd than what there is, and they're going to up the
Oh,
limits. So they use the information, not just to see if you're doing it legal or not, but that they'll use it to know what size of herd they have. That we need to kill 100,000 deer this year, and we only killed 80,000. Well, maybe next year we need to make it 120,000. And it's like, okay, well, we killed our 120,000. Well, maybe next year we need to do 100,000. So they kind of bounce it around. They do the same thing in fishing too. Size limits for like bass, is
oh
all
yeah.
determined by what the bait fish are doing.
Yeah. I know here, like I own a property. It's 8.25 acres. Me and my cousin do. We got it through inheritance, and it's got. Whew, I mean, I think one year I sat 3 sets. I seen 30 deer roll
Oh,
through. Yeah, I got a lot of them,
yeah.
and I even started trying to take fawns to slow the growth on the herd, because once you get
Right.
overpopulation of them, then your greenery and all that's going to get just stripped, and you won't have any cover for any other things. And they'll strip. I had some blackberries down here several years back before we had a tornado come through. It laid down all the trees back here, and I was hunting back here, and the deer, like on the underbrush. So when we get so many deer and they're hungry, they clean out some underbrush in a minute. I mean, it'll
Oh
be
yeah.
gone, and if you don't start thinning them out. And when I took 2 deer last year, two does, and come back to see they had 8 more fawns, yearlings. They had quite a bit of fawns last year. I mean, I was seeing 30 and 40 pound fawns before bow season.
Oh, that was.
Yeah, that was pretty good size, and
Yeah.
they had a gob of them. I'm like, I thought I was doing something, and when I looked on my game camera, there was about 8 more of them little suckers still there. I can't. It's hard to keep up with if everybody don't, get them thinned down and that'll keep from diseases spreading too.
Right.
Uh,
Well, a lot of people like to only shoot the big bucks, and it's like, well, you can't control a herd with big bucks, because if you got a one buck left, he's going to do as many as he can.
yeah.
And if you
Well,
get too many of them now, then they go out nocturnal, and you can't get them. So,
yeah,
besides, I think the does taste better anyway.
yeah. I like eating the does. I like eating them about 60 to 100 pounds, which is really higher quality meat than an older deer.
Right.
It's not as much you got to do, and it's not as gamey, which I don't mind that taste. I got people here that do. My wife won't even touch deer meat, so it don't matter how good it is, and uh, she'll make it. She'll make it for me, but now I get it processed in a way where I can grill most of it.
Oh
Back
yeah.
tenderloins, uh, make it into sausage, stuff like that. So, and there's like me and her older son. I'll cook some sausage, and I'll tell him, there's some deer meat in there, deer sausage, and he'll come in there and get get what he wants when he makes breakfast for himself and all that. So it's you know, pretty good meat, but it's a higher grade of meat
Right.
than what you would get at a grocery store. I mean,
Oh yeah, there's no growth hormones, no antibiotics, and
yeah,
none of those chemicals added to it. It's all natural organic growth because they're
yeah.
going to eat the grasses and the crops and stuff. Around here in Nebraska, a lot of our deer are corn or soybean fed.
Oh yeah,
There's a
that's a
lot of
big.
cornfields. So, we have some really good meat out here. Now you go out in western Nebraska where the mule deer are at, and there's a lot of sage and stuff. So,
Oh yeah,
they're a little bit different tasting meat, but um,
yeah. Here,
what
they a lot of deer graze on a lot of different things. I mean, they especially like this little brush. It's got real small leaves. They'll nip the tops off on it, get all the leaves off of it, and that's how I found some deer on game lands, just by looking at the tops of those little bit of brush. I can't remember what it's called, but I start seeing fresh nips. I know they're coming in there. I just got to figure out what time they're coming
yeah,
in. And if you don't disturb them too bad, they keep the same pattern. If you start disturbing them, they'll start changing their patterns.
right.
Uh, in this area, it's more of a morning hunt than it is an evening. I've seen bigger deer in the evening, but it's more of a morning type hunt or late afternoon. But you get closer to the evening, you might see one, but it'll be a good sized deer when it comes through, if you see it, if they don't stay in the thick stuff. Because I'm right on the edge of the thick stuff where they
Oh
come
yeah.
out. They got a network of trails back in there. It's just you don't know where they coming from. And the more closer you get to it, the tougher making a shot it is because you got so much stuff in the way.
Yeah, it's the deer population starts getting really busy. There's one of the forests here, um, not too far from me here that, back in the 60s and 70s, you couldn't see maybe 20 feet, 30 feet. It was
Yeah.
just so thick. And they didn't allow hunting there. And they finally had to start having some controlled hunts because you can see 100 yards in the forest now because the
Oh
deer
yeah.
just everything that they could reach is gone. They just ate
Oh yeah.
everything.
Yeah,
And,
they
and
will.
and
They'll
they went through
decimate an
like the
area.
blue tongue and all the diseases, and it's like, they're going to shorten the herd some way. It's going to get reduced one way or another,
Oh yeah. Yeah.
whether it's diseases or hunting. And at least you have the herds healthier if you don't have those diseases. And
Yeah, it is.
so they started having controlled hunts, and you had to go down and prove you could hit what you're aiming at, and
Oh yeah.
which is
Yeah.
is kind of an interesting story. When I was in one of the archery clubs, we had a broadhead sight-in day where we had broadhead targets out, because normally you can't shoot broadheads. Well, they're cardboard targets that get stocked. So we had broadhead targets, and we set them up at different ranges, like 10 yards. And I was amazed at how many couldn't even hit the target.
Oh yeah.
This is a 2-foot square, and they're missing the target. Not just hitting the spot, but they're missing the whole target, and just barely keep it in this thing. It's like, and you're ready to go hunt?
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of guys don't. That's why a lot of guys went to expandables, a lot less tuning. Uh,
Yeah.
when it come down to it, I shot my first deer with a nap kill zone. It did its job. I mean, I just got to thinking too many moving parts, and I started going to a fixed blade after that. And then I started figuring out, yeah, you got to start tuning these things to get good air flight. And I had a Magnus Stinger 100 grain, and I shot a slick trick 100 grain standard. And I tuned them all the way out to 50 yards, and they were hitting fist size, about size of a heart on the 3D target at 50 yards. I ain't even tried no further than that because I wasn't shooting that far, but
Right.
I shot a lot then. Didn't have the issues I have now. So uh, I was shooting quite a bit, and I didn't mind shooting a deer at 40 yards. I was pretty much about a 2-inch group at 40 then. Now, yeah, I'd just rather be closer and not have to walk as far.
Right.
And but those broadheads, once they're tuned, they fly. Even the Magnus, I mean, it's a bigger bladed. I had a 4-blade, had the 2 bleeder blades and the 2 main blades, and it flew just really good out to 50. I didn't have any issues with aeroflight. So tuning your broadheads is a big thing. Even with if you had just a mechanical, I mean, because it's an extra length on your arrow that you didn't normally have with a field tip.
Right.
Everybody, if you put any broadhead on a Hooter shooter on a shooting machine, they're going to hit hole to hole. They're going to match. I don't care what broadhead it is. And it's going to hit the same holes as a field point. The problem is with us is there's a lot of human error when it comes to shooting a bow. That Hooter shooter doesn't have any error. Right. But every broadhead will shoot hole to hole with a field point. And I had to learn that, not too about a couple of years ago. And if you put it on a Hooter shooter and it's got no mistakes, every broadhead's going to fly like a field point.
Right. Yeah, I know on my bow that I use for hunting, I set up to shoot field points, and then I put broadheads on, and I tuned the broadhead so they all hit in the same spot, but they didn't hit the same with the field point.
Yeah.
So my hunting bow was set up to shoot broadheads, and when I'm tuning my broadheads, I have what you call the U-bar, which is a cone-shaped washer, and then a rubber O-ring, and then put the broadhead on, because I shoot Muzzy. Muzzy is the only broadhead I've ever hunted with. Yeah. I started with a 4-blade, now I'm down to 100 grain 3-blade. Okay. And you'll put it on, and I start off with lining up the blades with the fletching. Yeah. And shoot. And then I can tweak it a little bit more, tighten it up, loosen it up, and you can actually direct where that broadhead hits. Yeah. So as I'm sighting them in at 20 yards, I'm tuning my broadheads to hit the X-ring. And then, okay, it's done. And then, so I got my sight set up, I got it tuned in. The next one, I come in, tune in, and okay, so I do them all. So I know all of them will hit the X-ring. So that bow is set up for broadheads. If I do practice with field tips, they're not going to hit in the same spot, but I don't care because I know the broadheads hit there. Yeah.
I try to get my broadhead and my field point to fly together within reason. You're going to have some broadheads that's not going to, G-haw per se. You might be trying to shoot a pretty good size cut. You might need a smaller, but I've got enough broadheads here I can play with, and that I've used for practice heads, and I can figure out what's going to work and what ain't. I want to be kind of within, I don't know, the broadhead being within 2 inches of my field point. But as long as if it drops lower than my field point, I'd rather it be lined up directly under it, so I'll know how it flies. But that could be just a little bit of tuning your knocking point or D-loop, whatever, bringing it up to bring your broadhead, your field point and your broadhead together. But I try to get them as close as I can, so that way I don't have any question about when I tell you, take a shot, it's going to be there.
Yeah, that's why I didn't worry about the field points. I just worried about broadheads. I know it shoots the broadheads like it's supposed to. The pins are lined up. I have another bow that I shoot, I go in 3Ds and stuff. I don't use my hunting bow for that. I have a drop away rest on the other one. And I actually have a set of the Montac G5s mechanicals that I was going to shoot one time when I just didn't have time to, go through and test my, my hunting bow. I was going to use the other one because I need a new string on it, and I hadn't done that in a while. And being a bow tech, yours is the last bow you work on it. Yeah. I was like, okay, I need a new string. This is starting to get worn out. I need a new string. It's like another year goes by. I need another new string. It's like, oh, I ain't got no choice now. It broke over the winter time. When my hunting bow was setting up. I was like, okay, it broke. Now I got to make a string, and then you go through everything else, and then you got to go through, set them all up, and then the other bow was a new bow, and of course the strings, I hate to say bad about PSC strings, but they're PSC strings they put on the bows back 20 years ago.
Yeah,
on a good day they were crap.
Oh wow.
They just didn't, they just weren't very good strings. Now
Yeah,
there for a while they're on the upper end bows, they were putting winner's choice strings on, which no, those were good strings, but the
yeah, they're
original
very
one were not very good. And one of my staff shooters, every time we get a new bow in, because about every other year you get a new bow, and he wouldn't even shoot it. It's like, okay, I got to make him new strings.
oh wow.
Pull off the brand new strings, but the only is because it was just too much work. They seem like they'd never stop stretching or moving, and
Yeah.
you put them on and it settles down and go.
Most factory strings are not all that great. You might get a good year out of it, maybe. I think the best factory string I've shot was the Zebra Hybrid that Matthews had.
Yeah.
And it actually lasted 2 years. I didn't even, when I had a Mission, it's one of their 33 axle bows. It had the same cam system as the Chill X and Chill R. And I was a big fan of that weighted cam system. And that string lasted 2 years. And once it settled in, it stayed there. That was the best factory string I've ever shot. But now any other string from any other company, I try to get rid of it and get I'm using America's Best bow strings on my other ones, and I've liked those pretty good. And Winner's Choice is a great choice too for strings. Their customer service is through the roof.
Yeah, I know there's a lot of good string manufacturers
Yeah.
nowadays, but I kind of I really can't justify buying a string when I have enough string material and the jigs to make a
Yeah.
new string probably every month for the rest of my life and still not run out of string material. I might have to
Yeah.
buy some end loop serving or center serving, but the string material is like, when I was doing it before, if I bought one roll of string material, the first time I made a string, pretty much paid for it. And now I had enough to make probably 20 or 30 more strings out of that one color.
Oh, wow.
The big rolls, you can get a lot of strings out of them. And, I had all kinds of different colors, BCY is that's all I use for string material when I buy them. I do have some of the other stuff that was left over, from when I bought the store from the guy. He had some other ones, but I use the 8125 for all the compounds. And then for recurs, I use B500, a little more stretch for the recurs. Because
Yeah.
unless the recurve or longbows specifically and reinforced take the faster strings, you'll break the tips off. So I just don't use them.
The D97 on
Yeah.
the ones that were reinforced. My Bob Lee Black Hawk, I had actual carbon limb tips because the reason carbon's pretty tough.
Yeah.
It's very strong, a lot stronger than wood. So I had the limb tips done in carbon also for that very reason. To keep it from snapping, because it does have a wood core. I think it's a bamboo core in it. That's why I had the carbon limb tips reinforced in carbon. It kind of looks boring black, but it's strong.
Yeah.
Even the riser was micarta. You ain't breaking that. So
no.
You'd have to really intentionally try to break it. That bow was built to last a while, long while, years, my lifetime.
I know that's, the old bows, you'd be like a poured riser, and, they weren't near as strong as the new machined aluminum risers. And I had an American, I forget which other model, Challenger or something like that. High Point actually bought them out. Mm-hmm. And I'm shooting the bow, getting ready for hunting season, getting everything all sighted in, and I'm shooting, and I just can't get the pin set. I was like, what's going on? Because I'll shoot and then it's off. I adjust and shoot again, shoot some more. And finally I decide, you know what? I'm going to go up close. I drew back and shot, and I'm holding the bottom half of the bow. The top half comes back and smacks me in the chest. The riser broke at the hand, right where your hand holds it. And now then, it was a week or 2 weeks for hunt season. Now I'm trying to go out. I got to go to the shop and say, okay, I need a bow. And that's when I bought my first PSE bow. And, I had that for a long time. And I shot the old double X 78s 2512s, which double X 78s, for those that don't know, unless you know about aluminums, that's a
Yeah.
25/64 diameter with a 12 thousandths or 12/64 thickness, and it's a real heavy spined arrow.
Oh
And the
yeah.
double X 78 was a .0015 straightness. So it's a real straight, and they're expensive. Back then, it was like $65 a dozen. I got to remember, this is back in the 80s and 90s, is like when I was doing most of this, so it's
Yeah.
been good 25, 30 years ago, and they were still that expensive. But I'd buy a new dozen every year, and back then the rest had a 2-prong rest. In order to adjust the inside one, you had to take the set screw out, pull out the outside pin, and adjust the inside one, put the outside back in, put the set screw in, and adjust. If it wasn't right, you had to do it again. And
Yeah.
it was a real pain to get that rest adjusted, so it was that perfect, getting a really good flight. And
Yeah.
when I sold it, I told the guy, I says, okay, unless you're going to change your rest, only shoot 25/12s, double X 78s, because it shoots perfect with that arrow set up just like that. If you change anything, you might as well put a new rest on it.
Yeah.
Because
It's
they're not.
aggravating. You got to do it that
Yeah,
way.
you get them set, and you learn how to set them doing that. But man, it's like, okay, I got to tweak it 64th of an inch in, and then you tweak it and you put it in. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, it's back then we did a lot of things to get as much speed out of the bows we can. A lot of guys that shoot 90 pounds just so we can get some speed out of them.
Yeah.
I never did, but it's one of those things that don't have to anymore. The bows
No,
are
not
getting so
anymore.
fast. And
Oh,
it was really easy to get broadheads to fly because they were slower. What I've found, in my experience, is the bows get faster, fixed blades get harder and harder to control.
they do.
And then at some point, it's like next to impossible to get them to fly, and then you might as well go to mechanical because you can't get them to fly consistently because it's so fast.
Oh
And the
yeah.
other thing I noticed too is the faster the bow, the more perfect your form's got to be.
Oh, you definitely.
It's like it magnifies your mistakes. So if you
Yes,
have a
it does.
slight mistake on a slow bow, it doesn't care. You go,
Yeah.
you're fine. On a fast bow, you take that same mistake and you might be off by inches to a foot. The same mistake where before
Yeah.
it puts you right on.
Oh
That's
yeah.
one of the disadvantages of these bows. And then they're getting shorter and shorter, and the shorter and shorter ones are harder to hold steady. Just like your target shooters have that great big long bar, stabilized bar in front, and then 2 counterweights. It makes that bow really heavy, but that long bar keeps it from moving. You can hold it steady.
Yeah.
And I like to take, like, okay, you got that real long bow, I got a short bow, and now take a pencil and move it back and forth with your fingers. Now take a long stick and try and do that. You can't move it. It resists you wanting to move. And
Yeah.
that's the advantage of the longer bows. Now there's
They're
other
long
problems that
ones.
come in with the long ones, but that's where it's very important if you're having problems, to get with an instructor and say, hey, what am I doing wrong? Because there's something wrong. And especially when you take in, when I worked at Cabela's, this guy, he couldn't group or nothing. So he wanted to put a dropway rest on it, figuring that would take care of his problem. So I put the dropway on it. And how do you tell if a dropway is working? You got to shoot it.
Yeah.
Because a lot of you draw back, let down, it doesn't drop. Unless it's one of those, if the ones that lock up, otherwise they'll drop, but you don't know, is it set up right or not? So I took his bow, I drew back and I shot, drew back the second time, shot again, stuck 2 arrows together. And the guy come in, he says, I couldn't get it to group. It's like, I shot twice, stuck 2 arrows together. I guess it ain't the bow now.
Yes, usually I had to learn that valuable lesson because usually 99.5% of the time it's the archer, not the equipment.
Right.
I went to a great extent one day. I thought I couldn't hit nothing with my recurve. And it's like, I'll just retune the arrows and see. After a couple hours, I was back in the same spot, same knock height, same everything. So that's when I realized it's me. And I started working on me before I started working on the bow, and all that time wasted. And I got a guy that's like that, even with guns. If his bow was off, oh, it's the bow. No, it's you probably. You just ain't
Right.
shot in a while, and it's all off. It's you, but he never would believe it. But it's whatever. One
Well,
each to his own. I had to learn that valuable lesson. It's a humble pie eating time there.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's like I shoot 2 arrows, and the best part was there was a couple of guys sitting there watching while I was shooting this. And one of the
Mm.
other guys was helping somebody else shoot, and I shot these 2 arrows and stuck together. It's like the guy says, "I never seen anybody do that." Yeah, it's not my first one here. I've had another one earlier. Another time I got one there when I worked at Cabela's, and
Right.
that was an interesting one. They had a Cabela's branded bow, and we get it set up, and I shoot 2 shots, stick 2 arrows together. Can I do that all the time? Oh, no way. It's just one of those lucky things. And then we set up another guy, he put little 5 1-inch circles down there and hit 4 of the 5. You set up for a third guy, and he's hitting really good with it. And the hunting manager comes back and says, "Oh, we need to pull them. They're having lots of problem with this bow." We had 3 of them. We only set one up. And I said, "Here, I just did this with it. Take a picture of that, send it to them. It's like, this is what the bow just did. I just stuck 2 arrows together with your bow that says you can't set them up." And I said, "Well,
Yeah.
let us set up the other 2 and see if it might be just, this is a good one." Says, "No, no." So they pulled them all. And our first thought, John, I thought, was like, well, they don't know what they're doing. When you go to like Bass Pro, Cabela's,
Yeah.
Dick's, Shields, do you have a bow tech that knows anything? Or your salesman, do they know anything about archery? Might not. You might have somebody that really knows a lot about it. I was fortunate. I worked at Bass Pro. There was 4 of us there, and probably between the 4 of us, we probably had 60 to 80 years experience between the 4 of us. I had my own shop, I worked at another shop and
Yeah.
everything else. And then when I went out to Cabela's, I had more archery experience than everybody in the store combined. I'm teaching the guy that's supposed to be in charge of the archery department, how to work on bows. And then one of the guys that used to work with it, Bass Pro, he come out there. So now between the 2 of us, we had good knowledge about what to do and
Yeah.
set things up. And then now neither one of us are there. So I think last time I was there, I think the person that I went in there one time and it's like, well, I applied for this other department, but they said they really need somebody in archery because there's nobody really in archery. And he says, well, I shot a bow when I was a kid.
Oh,
That's the
wow.
extent of their knowledge. So you don't know.
Yeah.
And that's what I always recommend it. If you really want to get somebody that knows what's going on, go to a pro shop,
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely.
because you don't know. If you're
Yeah. They
brand
can.
new, go to a pro shop first because they're going to know what's going on. Now, if you have a little more experience, have been shooting for a while, now you can go in and you can find out real quick if they know anything about it because they're just not going to know anything.
Yeah.
So when I go in there, it's like, I want to try out this release. I just need to open up this. Nah, I just need to try that release out. Then they have one of those firing line things that you can draw them back and you can practice with them and see. It's not perfect, but at least you can feel how it shoots. And like, okay, thanks. That's all I needed.
Oh, yeah.
They're like, I think I forgot more about archery than what you know. So, but I don't tell it to them because that's not. I'm not there to make them look bad. I don't need their help other than get a key out.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, I've enjoyed it. I hate to cut it short.
Oh,
I gotta get a nap for work because I work nighttime, 12-hour days. So
we'll cut it short. We're actually an hour over what we normally do.
yeah.
They seem to go always a little bit longer. So,
Yeah.
hey,
Yeah.
what are your parting thoughts before you get out of here? And then we'll let you go and we'll go on with our day.
Uh, I don't know. My parting thoughts would probably be, especially somebody getting into archery, is basically work on your foundation, your form first. Worry about hitting the target later. That's if I had to do it all over again, that would be the way I would do it instead of trying to get results. If a person's result oriented, they're gonna have a hard time with archery because there's a process that you need to follow to get those results. And if you can get that process down, it's like Larry Bird, probably one of the greatest basketball players to ever play the game, worked on fundamentals. if he had a good base of fundamentals, man couldn't jump but so high, but he had a good eye for the game of fundamentals, and that's what made him great. And even a lot of present to past basketball players talked about how good he really is. And if you want to be that good, work on your fundamentals, and that would be my advice: is get your fundamentals down, worry about results later, because the results will come along with good fundamentals. And that what I would definitely suggest to do.
And that's definitely, you know, what I recommend doing as well. Is, you know, you need to get the fundamentals down, get yourself a good coach. You know, I've helped lots of people teach, so a lot of people shoot. I've been teaching, you know, so like I said, since '95. So, you know, anybody has any questions on it, you know, just get a hold of me. One thing to do is join the Archery Talk 101 Facebook group. There we have all, you know, a lot of content in there, a lot of archers that can help you out. If you have a problem, take a video and upload it. Let us take a look at your video and see what you're doing. We can all help you out. So thanks for being on the show. I really enjoyed talking with you.
It's a joy. Real pleasure talking with you.
That's why I like doing this. It's a lot of fun, and you know, anybody interested in being a guest on here, do you want to learn archery? You qualify. You know, somebody new, just anywhere from somebody new just getting their first bow to looking to get their first bow to Olympic archer and professional archers. You know, we talk to everybody. You know, that's the only quiet is like, we're going to talk archery. So if you want to talk archery, hey, come join us. We'd love to have you. My name is Roy Canterbury, and I've been the host today on Archery Talk 101, and we'll see you on the next one.